everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Kavanaugh's Corner. You might see that I'm in my Don Johnson outfit today, and that's because I'm going to be talking about X-Men Apocalypse. Now, funny enough, this movie takes place in the 80s, so I figured I might as well go with the 80s fashion for this one. You have to excuse my voice. I'm getting over kind of a really awful cold that I've had for the past week or so, and my voice may go in and out. I apologize for that. But pretty much I want to talk about X-Men Apocalypse because it's a movie, again, that's been getting some really mixed reviews, and I wanted to give you my opinion of it. Overall, I guess I could say that this is not a movie that's on the level of Captain America Civil War, or even, I'd say, on the level of other past X-Men movies, although it is a lot better than, The Last Stand and the Wolverine Origins movie. But all in all, this is not it's not a great movie, but it's not a bad movie either. I think the one thing that can be said about X-Men Apocalypse is that Bryan Singer is in full force in this movie. He's having a good time, and you can tell he had a good time making this movie. The director is done, he did Days of Future Past, he did, the first X-Men movie, the second one. Regrettably bowed out of the third one. He has a nice little jab that's in this movie. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but he has a nice little jab at that third movie in this one. But that third X-Men movie is so badly hated by him and by many other people that he literally made Days of Future Past to basically eliminate that movie. So very interesting to see him actually give a pretty well-pointed jab at that movie in this one. But anyway, overall, X-Men Apocalypse, if you've seen any of the previews, you basically know the very straightforward story is that Apocalypse is basically the first mutant that's ever lived, and he needs to assemble his four horsemen in order to basically take over the world and cleanse it of its problems, which in this case, Apocalypse's problems are basically all of humanity that are not mutants. So he basically wants to destroy the world. And, of course, it's up to the X-Men to stop him. Of course, he does actually attract a few of the X-Men that are normally good, which is kind of interesting. Again, not going to spoil anything for you, but the story, I think, in this movie is honestly the weakest part. I think everything other than the story is actually very interesting, but the story in this movie is very straightforward. There are no real surprises. Again, not to spoil anything in the story, but there's no moments, except for one moment, which I'm going to talk about at the very end of the review, so I do not spoil it for you. But there is one moment in the film that I was genuinely surprised. But more or less, what I've told you is pretty much the story. There's nothing more than that. I think the villain of the story, I think Apocalypse himself, is not a very interesting character. He is a very bland, kind of straightforward character, is a one-note kind of villain, which is too bad because villains in the past in the X-Men story have been actually very interesting, and this is one that they just couldn't do as good as the comics. And I don't think they could have. There's one or two little things I think that I wish that they put in this movie that they didn't, but in my opinion, just Apocalypse in this movie just was not a very enthralling character as he was in the comics. He's just not something that I thought was a very incredible villain like you had in other X-Men films that came before that. Sorry, again, I'm losing my voice here. The other problem that I had with this film is that the acting in this one, this time around especially, is kind of lackluster. With the exception of Michael Fassbender as Magneto and James McAvoy as Professor X, everybody else in this movie is very flat with one exception. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. One other exception, except for the two main leads. Jennifer Lawrence in this movie is on total autopilot. And I think it's clear that she doesn't want to be a part of the series anymore, which is too bad because this series really gave her a start in Hollywood. and I don't think she recognizes that, which is too bad because I really love Jennifer Lawrence, and I think she's an amazing actress when she wants to be. This film here, she goes into what I like to refer to as Roger Moore mode, where, you know, she's 3 or 4 films in. She's done this character basically to the best that she can. She has nothing else to prove, and she's just there delivering her lines and collecting a paycheck, which is really too bad, because I think if she did give this movie a little more oomph, if she did give it a little more power, I think this would have been a very incredible kind of act for her to follow from Days of Future Past, and she just doesn't deliver in this. And it's too bad, because her part in this movie is actually kind of interesting. Other than that, I mean, you know, Michael Fassbender, I mean, he has a very, very emotional scene in the film. And again, not going to spoil it for you, but it is very integral to why his character goes a certain way through most of the film. And it's a very moving moment. Actually, this movie does have a couple extremely moving moments. And that's one thing I did like about the film, is that in a way you do get emotionally involved, but never to the point where I was shocked in any way. But there was a moment where I was pretty emotionally distraught, and Fassbender's performance only drove that home even further. He really gives it his all in this movie, and he probably didn't have to, but at this point I'm pretty much convinced that Fassbender can deliver a dynamic performance in a coma. He doesn't even have to be physically moving to, I mean, he could be fast asleep and it would be one of the most incredible performances ever. He is just a very talented actor, and I think right now he's being very underutilized in Hollywood, which is such a shame, because the guy can do anything. He can literally do anything, and it's just such a shame that we're going to get him in Assassin's Creed. I don't know. Anyway, but we'll have to see how that goes. But other than that, I mean, you know, James McAvoy is Professor X in this, rocking the Don Johnson Miami Vice look like I am right now. Again, he does a great job in this, and again, he's not given a lot to do, but when he is given something to do, he, again, just like Fassbender, he gives it his all. He's really in it, and he does a great job. Like, those two guys play off each other so well, and I think that's been one of the big strengths from these movies, is that just like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen play off each other great as the older versions of these characters in the earlier films, this one here, they really do an amazing job of, again, playing off each other, and that friend or foe aspect. Like, is Magneto gonna play good, or is he gonna be the bad guy? Like, he's a very dynamic character, and that's one thing I've always loved about Magneto. He's not afraid to play both sides at all times. It's very interesting stuff. Something else I think is kind of interesting is that the movie is more or less stolen by one character, and this character is, of course, Quicksilver. Much like his one scene that steals the whole movie in Days of Future Past, Quicksilver has 1 or 2 scenes in this movie where he literally, you could see him pick up the film and walk away with it. He is incredibly charming, to the point where when his scene starts up, and you know when it's going to happen, I was crying laughing. And I mean, I don't mean like, oh, that's funny, like they're doing this again. I mean, I was hysterically laughing in the movie theater. It is such a phenomenal scene. Again, special effects in this movie, one thing I do have to say, the special effects in this movie are stupendous. Quicksilver in this movie totally just runs away with the film. He is a true champ. The actor that plays him in this movie, good for you, man. Like, seriously, like, good on you, man. Like, he is spectacular. And I really want a standalone Quicksilver movie. I really want this to happen. Like, more than any other X-Men movie to come along now. I really want a Quicksilver movie. The other part that I thought was kind of sad about this movie is that the other characters, one of which being Storm, I really liked the way Storm looked in this movie, but her character is not fleshed out at all. She's just this girl that all of a sudden can you know, control the weather, and she's not given any backstory at all. Maybe they're saving that for the next one. I don't know, but the characters in this movie, with the exception of the characters we've already been introduced to, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, and Psylocke, who I thought was amazing in this movie. Olivia Munn just killed it as Psylocke in this movie. But none of these characters have any sort of story. They're not given any sort of character. And Jean Grey is the one you get probably closest to more than anybody, along with Cyclops. But even her character is not really fleshed out, but she did a good job with what she was given. Cyclops, not so much. His part is kind of... You get a little growth, but it's nothing too crazy. The main problem I had with this movie is that, like I said, they can only go so far with what they're given, and that's just, it's too bad. Like, it's really too bad. One thing that I really enjoyed about the movie was parts of the finale I thought were very inventive. Some of it was a retread of X-Men movies of the past, but there's one part of the finale, again, I'm not going to spoil here, that I thought was very inventive, and it's something I've been kind of waiting to happen in an X-Men movie for a long time now. And it does happen, and I think they did a great job with it. And it involves Professor X and Apocalypse, which it's a really great kind of way that they kind of connect those two characters. I think they did a good job with that. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Very inventive kind of way to put something that I've been waiting to see in an X-Men movie for quite a while. Other than that, though, I felt that the movie was it's almost like they could have done more with it, but they just didn't. I also think that if they did all the things that I would want them to do in this, it would have a 3.5-hour movie, and of course you just can't do that. You just can't make an X-Men movie of that kind of length and have it be even halfway watchable. But for what they did with this one, I do have to say I think they did a pretty good job. It's not the greatest of the series, sure as hell ain't the worst, but I think it was watchable, I think it was entertaining. I really liked some aspects of the movie, and I kind of didn't like other aspects of it. Like I said, the acting was definitely something I didn't really care for. I didn't really care much for the villain either, but especially Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse. He's a great actor, but he just couldn't do anything in this movie. Especially in the outfit he was given. I don't think he could have done anything, but he's not given anything to do, which is why I give this movie not a great, not a bad, not an ugly, but a good. It's a good movie. It's nothing too crazy, but it's at least a good X-Men movie, and I think it's worth the watch, but it's not anything spectacular. It's not like Captain America Civil War. Definitely not as, I wouldn't say, it's not gonna divide people like it did, like a Batman vs. Superman did, even though I enjoyed that movie. This one here, I'd say it was a solid good. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was a good movie. Now, I'm gonna go into a little spoiler aspect of here, so if you haven't seen the movie, please turn the video off at this point. I bid you adieu. But if you have seen the movie already, there's one aspect of the film I wanted to talk about that I didn't want to spoil in the review. I'm going to spoil it for you now. So, spoilers, again, I've warned you, stop the video if you haven't seen the movie yet. If you're going to see it, one of the trailers has already spoiled this, but here we go. Wolverine's part in this movie is basically a cameo. And the cameo, I think, is spectacular. I think he may have been one of the best parts of the movie. Now, was it necessary for him to be in this movie? Absolutely not. Honestly, they could have just not even had that. It also feels like the way the characters get to the base where Wolverine is like the most contrived thing in the whole movie. But if a nuclear launch just happened and all the nuclear bombs were launched into space, and the origin of it was somehow tracked to Professor X's school, I guess they would send Stryker after them because he's kind of the guy in charge of like anti-mutant stuff now. I guess they don't really explain it in the movie, but they had to find a way to recreate that escape scene that has now been done 3 fucking times in an X-Men movie. How many times are we gonna have to see the escape from the facility part from X2? We've seen it in X2, X-Men Origins Wolverine, and now we've seen it in an alternate version in this. Now, here's my thing. I've enjoyed every iteration of this scene, okay? Every single time we've seen Wolverine get out of his confinement of sorts. This is a little bit different in this one. Somehow he's been confined and turned into Weapon X. Funny enough, the third time's the charm. I thought this was the best representation of that scene. Now, it's kind of a throwaway. I'm probably going to get a little flack for this, but this is probably the most bloodiest that Wolverine has been. And we're talking about this is bloodier than some of the scenes in the R-rated cut of Wolverine, of the Wolverine, I should say. Not the Origins movie, but the one that takes place in Japan. That Wolverine movie. This is probably the bloodiest Wolverine action we've ever had on screen. And that's really saying something because, I mean, he gets pretty brutal in some of those other movies, but this is the closest we've ever gotten to comic book Wolverine, and he's in it for like 60 seconds. I mean, he's barely in the movie. But again, Hugh Jackman has fully embodied this character to the point where we're not even questioning if he can do the part. He is the part at this point. And I think that leaves us for the Old Man Logan movie. Honestly, I think they should do one more movie. I think they should do one more X-Men movie with all the characters, do the Old Man Logan movie, and then call it a day. I think this series is dead. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think the series is kaput. They've done everything they can possibly do. You know, the teaser at the end of the movie hinting at Mr. Sinister in the next film. I'm excited for that. But in the end, I think we're done. I think after Old Man Logan and the Mr. Sinister thing, I think we're done with this, and I think it's going to be time for a reboot. And I'm looking forward to it. I've enjoyed most of the X-Men movies. Like I said, I think First Class, Days of Future Past are fantastic movies. I even like X2. Like, I think that's a great movie. But in this one, I think we've reached kind of the zenith, as they say, and I think it's time to go back to the beginning. But I am looking forward to Old Man Logan and whatever other X-Men movie they do from here. I just think it's time to call it a day. Anyway, thank you again for watching this. My name's Andrew Kavanaugh. Thank you again for coming at Kavanaugh's Corner, and we'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye bye.